Hello everyone. Before we get into today's case, I just wanted to let you all know we're going to have a few less videos in the next week or so. And that is because my husband's actually coming to visit and I haven't seen him in 5 months. So I want to be able to spend some time with him. So I have just limited my load of how many videos I'm going to be putting out, but I'm still going to be talking about cases with you all. I think I'm narrowing it down to about 2 videos per week. Some of these are cases that you've requested. Some are ones that I found very interesting, but I just wanted to let you all know because I have been posting every other day, which is a lot of work, but I truly love talking about these cases with you all and helping spread the word on these cases. And so I still wanted to continue to do so, even though I'm taking a little bit of a break, although not truly a break because I'm still going to be here talking to you all. So with that, let's get into today's case. Today we're going to be diving into the strange amount of disappearances in the small town of Dawson Creek, British Columbia, a small city with a population of just under 1,300 people on the border of Alberta. And this town, for some reason, has a very, very high amount of disappearances, as well as violence happening. A lot within a very short amount of time, which, in my opinion, is very strange. So let's dive into the case that really brought the spotlight to this small town. 24-year-old Cole Hosack was born on November of 1999 in McLennan, Alberta, to his single mother, Julie. He was the youngest of his siblings, Brian and Taylor, who was said to have a loud personality. He'd also spent a lot of time in his youth living in Fort McMurray, Alberta, until a wildfire actually destroyed their home and eventually caused them to move to southern Alberta while the town was restored. Cole would eventually return to Fort McMurray and would end up having a son. Now, the relationship with his son's mother didn't end up working out, but despite that, Cole was still extremely active in his son's life. As you can see from the photos, he was always spending time with him. From all accounts, he was an extremely devoted father. Eventually, Cole would meet a girl named Morgan, and the two fell in love. They'd actually met back in 2016 when Cole went over to British Columbia to visit friends, and mutual friends introduced them. Morgan said from the start they both had a lot in common. They watched the same shows, they liked the same music and food. The two just clicked. Despite their common interests, both of them lived in separate provinces though, and it didn't seem like at the time they wanted to do long distance. So they just remained close friends at this point. In June of 2022, Cole ended up moving to British Columbia, and by September, Cole and Morgan were now an official couple. Eventually, they would move back to Calgary, Alberta, so that Cole could be closer to his son, and he was able then to co-parent with his ex. Around this time is also when Morgan would realize that she was pregnant. However, Morgan would end up losing the baby, who they would eventually name Easton. Not long after she lost her first baby, Morgan would find out that she was again pregnant with a baby boy that they would go on to name Hendrix. At this point, they'd moved from Calgary back to Fort McMurray so that Cole was even closer to his son. However, with this pregnancy, Morgan would go into preterm labor, and 11 days later, she would be admitted to the hospital for the remainder of her pregnancy. At the 20-week anatomy scan, Cole and Morgan were informed that their son was very sick. So Morgan was stuck in the hospital. Cole was off working full-time. He worked driving a rock truck and other heavy equipment on his job site. Baby Hendrix would end up being born 8 weeks early with a heart defect and would pass away just over a week after he was born in November of 2023. That is a lot for such a young couple to go through. Cole was only 24 years old. After all of that, Cole's nephew, his sister Taylor's infant son, would also pass away. It was just blow after blow. Because of all of this, Morgan wanted to go back to Prince George to spend some time with her family and to have some family support. So her and Cole ended up packing up and going over to Prince George for a couple of months. The New Year's weekend of 2023, Cole had plans to travel from Prince George to Medicine Hat, Alberta, which was around 1,500 kilometers away, to start a new job and get a fresh start after all of the loss that he just experienced. Morgan wasn't really happy about having to stay back behind in Prince George. However, the whole plan was that Cole was going to go out to Medicine Hat, start this job, start making a life for them, and then Morgan was going to eventually meet him out there. And Cole wasn't traveling alone. He was actually traveling with a work friend named Shelby. And at the start of their trip, she decided she wanted to stop at her hometown of Dawson's Creek so that they could celebrate the New Year's there. She could meet up with some old friends that she hadn't seen in a long time. Keep in mind that this was the first time that Cole had ever been to Dawson Creek. The day after Cole and Shelby left on their road trip, Cole was in constant contact with Morgan and his family. He FaceTimed Morgan while they were on the road. He sent her pictures of the windmills they were passing. He also spoke to his mother, Julie, around this time, and everything seemed fine. Nothing seemed to miss. Cole had actually met Shelby at the mine that they worked at, and they both were heavy equipment operators. She said that Cole was always the happiest person ever, and he was very excited and determined to get the Medicine Hat so that he could start working, start saving his money so that he could start building a future for his family. Most of all, he wanted to move on from all of the hurt that had happened in his past, and he just wanted to start fresh. Once in Dawson Creek, Shelby ended up introducing Cole to her family, and they ended up hanging out with some of her childhood friends. She showed him around the little town, they went out and got some food. Shelby said that everything seemed completely normal, and Cole was getting along with all of her friends. On New Year's Eve of 2023, Cole and Shelby then decided to go out and celebrate the New Year's. They hit up a couple bars, one being called Spike's, before eventually going to their final destination, which was the Lone Star Bar located at 1140 Alaska Avenue in Dawson Creek. It was said to be more of a dive bar, but it was extremely busy. Everyone was celebrating the New Year's. However, Shelby was the designated driver that night, so she wasn't drinking, and Cole wasn't drinking much either because they were actually on a very tight budget because Cole hadn't been working since his son had died. And they still needed to have money to travel the rest of the way all the way to Alberta, which, involved gas, hotel rooms, food. So he was having a couple drinks, but he wasn't overdoing it. Shelby said that she ended up buying a couple drinks for Cole, and then right before the ball dropped, he had stopped drinking. Around midnight, Cole ended up telling Shelby that he was going to go out to her truck, have a smoke, and call Morgan. Morgan would end up receiving a FaceTime call from Cole around this time, not knowing this was going to be the last time she would ever see or talk to her fiancé ever again. She said that once again, nothing seemed off about him during this call. He was his normal self, he seemed happy, and he was having a good night out. He did, however, mention that someone had tried to buy their pool game. Now, this pool game situation turned out to be, if you don't know, normally at a bar or someplace where there's a pool table, you'll sit down, a quarter or whatever it costs to play the game, and you'll put yours down, meaning you're going to play the next round. However, it seemed like these guys wanted to continue playing and didn't want to share the table, so they ended up trying to give Cole and Shelby money to basically buy out their pool game. However, Cole ended up telling them no, we want to play our round. It said that these two guys tried to start a verbal altercation with Cole, one of them allegedly telling him to go fuck himself. But it said that after a while, that group ended up coming over and wanting to smooth everything over with Cole and Shelby, and they offered to buy them a few drinks, saying that they didn't want any trouble. After this, everything seemed fine, and then Cole went outside and called Morgan. At the end of the call, Cole ended up saying they weren't going to be out for much longer. They said their goodnights, their I love yous, and the call ended. After calling Morgan, Cole went back inside the bar so that Shelby could go out and have her cigarette. But they always made sure someone was in there watching their drinks, which is just overall a good safety rule. However, Shelby claimed she stepped outside the bar for a few minutes to have her cigarette, but when she went back inside, Cole was nowhere to be found. At this point, she ended up texting Cole but got no response. They were also at the bar with two older women who were in their 50s to 60s, and these two women were getting tired and wanted to go home at this point. So she thought at this point, Cole's probably in the bathroom. She went over to a bartender, let the bartender know, hey, if you see my buddy, just let him know we're outside warming up the car. However, when they waited a little bit and Cole didn't come out, she decided to just drive the two women home, and then she returned back to the bar. This time, Shelby began searching the crowd for Cole, asking people if they had seen him. She learned from one of the bartenders that there was a fight that happened outside, but this would actually turn out to involve a bunch of women. Shelby noted that the guys that they had been playing pool with earlier weren't there either at this point. So she started thinking maybe Cole went off to an after party with someone. Which on one hand, I don't know Cole personally, but he seemed courteous enough to let Shelby know that he was going to go outside and have a smoke and call Morgan. So you'd think if he was going to go off to some party, he would have at least let her know, hey, I'm going to this party, come pick me up there later or something. For him not even to text her or tell her where he was going just seems very out of character to him. It just doesn't make sense to me that he would ditch her or wander off somewhere without letting her know. This was his ride. He didn't know anyone in this town. He was staying with her and her family. It also didn't seem like he was trying to go off and sleep with someone because he did have a fiance back home. He didn't seem like that kind of guy. Obviously, again, I don't know him and some people are just like that, but it just didn't seem like that's something he would have done. He was just there to have a good time. He had just talked to Morgan on the phone and he hung up, went back inside, and then he just vanished. It's so weird. On top of that, the idea of Cole going off to an after party also just doesn't sit right with me because it would turn out that they were going to leave in the morning to continue their trip to Medicine Hat. So him getting completely wasted and staying up super late into the morning just also didn't line up to what his plans were or who he was, because he had made it a point to tell Morgan on the phone that he was going to be leaving soon. They weren't staying at the bar much longer. And the whole plan was they were going to go home and sleep because they were going to take turns driving the next day. And him driving hungover just didn't seem like a great idea or even enjoyable at all. Cole just didn't seem like the kind of guy overall to go get wasted with strangers that he had never met before or just met that night to then have to, drive for 12 hours. He just doesn't seem like that kind of guy. But of course, Shelby wasn't trying to think the worst case scenario at this point. And when she couldn't find Cole, she would eventually return home, waiting for him to maybe eventually text her to come pick him up somewhere. She had called him, she texted him, but Cole hadn't responded to any of it. After 1 a.m., Shelby says the messages stopped delivering to Cole's phone. However, around 3 a.m., Morgan realized that Cole wasn't answering any of her messages or phone calls either. Morgan claims she tried to message Cole around this time as well, saying the message did deliver, however Cole didn't respond. And it seemed like she kind of felt like maybe he was mad at her for some reason or something. And it started upsetting her because she was like, why is he ignoring me all of a sudden? You know, we just talked earlier. He said he was leaving the bar soon. Why isn't he calling me or messaging me back? By 6 a.m., Shelby was still waiting up for Cole to respond to her calls and messages. At this point, she thought maybe his phone had died during the night and he was sleeping and he'd eventually charge it once he woke up, because he had mentioned to her that night that his phone battery was around 30%. At 9:30 a.m., Morgan woke up and still hadn't gotten a response from Cole, which was extremely unlike him. He was always calling her and responding to her. She says she tried to message him, and this time it went through as a text message. She then tried to call him, but it seemed as if his phone was off. So Morgan was quickly getting a very bad feeling. At this point, she called Cole's ex to ask her if Cole had called to talk to his son, because every single morning, even if he was still in bed, he would call his son to talk to him. Again, he was an extremely loving and devoted father. But Cole's ex ended up informing Morgan that Cole hadn't called them that morning. Morgan said the rest of the day she then spent trying to get a hold of Shelby. When lunchtime rolled around and Cole still hadn't called Shelby to get picked up, she now started to get a bad feeling. Since Dawson Creek is such a small town, she pretty much knew everyone, it seemed like. So she ended up calling around, asking anyone if they had seen Cole that night or if he had gone to someone's party. But this seemed to kind of just turn into a whole rumor mill of Cole went off with these people. No, he went off with those people. No, he went over with these people. Shelby began sending Cole's picture around to the people who had hosted after parties that night, asking if they had seen her friend, but she kept getting the same response of no. A bartender from Lone Star would end up telling Shelby that a guy she had introduced him to had actually invited Cole to an after party. So Shelby thought, okay, maybe he went there. Shelby ended up messaging that guy, hoping, Cole would be found there. However, the guy ended up telling her that he hadn't seen Cole since the three of them had all been talking at the bar. Around 4 to 5 p.m., Morgan still couldn't get a hold of Shelby, but she did end up going on Facebook. And on Shelby's Facebook, she ended up seeing a picture of Cole that said missing, which I can't even imagine the way her stomach must have dropped. Eventually, Morgan and Cole's ex got a hold of Shelby, and from there, Morgan ended up contacting the RCMP and was able to give the police a full description of Cole. Meanwhile, Cole's mother, Julie, had just flown all the way to Ontario for a job when she was informed that her son was missing. So she literally had to turn around, get back on a flight, and fly back to Alberta. She then ended up driving from Calgary all the way to Dawson's Creek, and she said she couldn't get there until January 5th. By then, it seemed like police hadn't even really tried to search for Cole, but they were busy collecting surveillance footage. So family ended up beginning to search the small town. It would turn out that Cole had gone to the bar with any of his debit or credit cards. They were back at Shelby's house, which is why Shelby was also purchasing the drinks for him. So if he had gone off somewhere on his own accord, he wouldn't have had any money to buy anything like a hotel room or food or anything like that. Which, again, we already know him just walking off for no reason in a town he was very unfamiliar with just doesn't make sense. Julie ended up being able to access Cole's call history because he was under her phone plan, and she discovered his last outgoing call was at 12:29 a.m. However, he ended up calling an unknown person at that time, and that person didn't answer. The RCMP won't release who that person Cole called was either. However, it makes me wonder if this person that Cole ended up calling was someone he had just met that night. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but if someone gives you their phone number and you put it in your phone, you'll either text them or call them so that they can add you in their phone. And I wonder if that was the case why he called this person and they didn't answer, because they were standing, 2 feet away from him and he was just adding their phone number to their phone. But I could be completely wrong because this might just be someone he already knew, but the whole mystery of why he called this person and who this person is unknown. To make things stranger, Cole's family began trying to track his phone using Find My iPhone. And 5 days after his disappearance, Cole's phone would begin to ping at a residential address that hasn't been disclosed. Julie alleges that the police were told by the individual who ended up having the phone that they'd found the phone behind the TD Bank, which is less than a block from the bar. According to Shelby, the narrative is that it was a younger kid that ended up finding this phone and took it home to be charged so that they could turn it on and figure out whose phone it is. Now, the family doesn't believe that it was some kid that found the phone that took it home to heroically figure out who owned the phone. And that is also because police allegedly said Cole's phone was found in perfect condition, which doesn't really make sense if it had been sitting in a snowy parking lot for 5 days straight. No one ran over the phone or stepped on the phone. There was no water damage from the snow. It's a little weird. Surveillance footage would later allegedly show Cole exiting the bar around 12:29 a.m., around the exact time when Shelby had been inside the bar looking for Cole and then texted him, but he didn't respond. This is also allegedly around the time when he called that phone number that didn't pick up. That's a lot of stuff happening around that exact same timestamp. Now, there's allegedly a lot of surveillance footage. Police went through a lot of it. Because again, this only happened like 6 months ago as I'm filming this video. So thankfully in this case, we do have surveillance footage. However, police haven't really disclosed much about it. All we know is that there's this alleged footage of Cole exiting the bar at 12:29 a.m. There's also allegedly footage of him smoking a cigarette outside the bar. And then I've also seen conversation about him getting in a verbal altercation with an undisclosed group of people outside the bar. However, it said that no physical fight was witnessed. And that's another thing. Everyone strongly believes that Cole wouldn't have just went off with someone. He wouldn't have been forced off with someone. He would have stood his ground and made a scene. So how could someone get a grown man to just disappear at a very busy bar? But keep in mind, this is also a very small town. Family would begin walking the streets in the days after Cole went missing. They walked fields, they walked everywhere they could in case he had fallen, maybe hit his head, had a medical emergency, and maybe was laying in a snowy ditch somewhere. Yet he was nowhere to be found.
Julie Hosack has been on a desperate mission trying to find her missing son. The Strathmore woman says Cole Hosack was traveling over the holidays and made a stop in Dawson Creek. He was traveling with a friend who was going to drive him to Medicine Hat to start a new job. He went to a bar on December 31st and hasn't been heard from since.
Cole has no affiliation with the towns. I don't know why they think it would be gang related. Maybe it was wrong place, wrong time. I would assume he doesn't know anyone there. So I'm very it just makes no sense. And the thing about this being that now you have people that come to town that have never been there that are just disappearing.
Julie is in Dawson Creek this weekend conducting her own search. She's working with the families of 2 other women who have gone missing from the city of 13,000 people.
This also isn't like a lot of the other cases that I've covered of men getting intoxicated in rural areas and then just disappearing. Yes, it was winter. Yes, it was a small town in quite a rural area, but he was in the center of the town when he went missing. There's businesses and streets and sidewalks. He wasn't on some remote rural road and then just vanished in the thin air where we can say that maybe he did succumb to the elements after wandering into the woods or something and an animal took him off and we'll never see him again. As you can see on the map, he was pretty much in the center of the town. So how can he just disappear? It's not like he could have fallen in a ditch somewhere there and not been found. He would have been found if he had, got hypothermia and was laying on a sidewalk somewhere. But here we are 6 months later and Cole still hasn't been found. The family has also said that police won't bring in any dogs to search because they don't have a specific place to search for some reason, which is odd to me because wouldn't they want to track where he left the bar, maybe even towards the TD Bank across the street? Now, I don't know if this is just the way it was worded and police have brought in dogs to some capacity, but that's something you think they would have done, especially since they apparently have footage of him outside the bar. Julie would end up finding out that while Cole and Shelby were at the bar, there was actually another fight that took place, where a guy there ended up starting this random fight with an older man and his family. This older guy would end up telling Julie that Cole had noticed and actually stood up for him. But the Lone Star would later post on their Facebook page that there was no fights that happened that night, although there's apparently 3 separate incidences alone that we've talked about tonight where there was some kind of altercation. Actually 4 if we count that alleged surveillance footage of Cole having a verbal argument with someone outside. On top of that, one of the older women that was there with Cole and Shelby that night would then come out to claim that she had been drugged while at the bar that night. Shelby said that there had been these shots brought over to their table and that there was 4 shots there, although Shelby didn't want to drink one because she was the designated driver. She said there was 2 shots with limes in them and 2 shots that didn't have limes in them. And the woman that claimed to be drugged and Cole both drank the shots that had the limes in them. So is there a possibility that Cole could have been drugged? Or is there a possibility that he was accidentally drugged because maybe it was one of the other women they were hoping would also drink one of the shots with the limes, but then ended up turning out to be Cole that did? And that would make a lot of sense then, in my opinion. If Cole had been drugged, maybe he went outside, wasn't feeling good, maybe that verbal argument ensued, and then either maybe he wandered somewhere or someone took advantage knowing that he was not fully, conscious or there and did something to him. I've talked about before in another video about how I had a friend who was also a man that was drugged at a bar, and he didn't even know how he got drugged either, but it was extremely scary because he was coherent, but he was blacked out the entire time, he would claim later. He didn't remember any of it, which was very scary because he actually drove us home. And then he would later fall asleep on the couch, and I thought he was dead at one point because he didn't seem to be breathing. But then he just woke up out of nowhere, and eventually in the morning, he would, tell us all that he didn't remember any of it and that he believed he was drugged. We went back to the bar, we told the bartender and everything. It was like a whole thing, but it happens. Men do get drugged too. But at this point, it seems like police have something. They're just not really saying much. Cole's mother, Julie, saying, and I quote, "My worst fear is going to be going 30 years without knowing where he is. The torture, the torment every day. You wake up and it's Groundhog Day because I'm still living that day. January 1st. End quote. And not only has Julie lost a son, but she's also lost 2 grandchildren in the last year as well. On top of that, Morgan lost her baby and her partner. I can't even imagine. This video Morgan ended up taking of Cole being an eerie premonition of what was to come.
You need to post it on the socials.
I don't want to post it. I just want it for my own memories.
No. You can see it whenever you want. We'll be together forever, baby.
What's so interesting to me is how tight-lipped police have been in this case, just in general, honestly, because they seem to have a lot of video surveillance footage that contains Cole, yet they haven't released it, which is interesting because then the US, as we talk about the comparison a lot, we have talked about cases of young men exactly around Cole's age who have gone missing recently in the last year, and police have released the surveillance footage so that people can see how he looked, what he was wearing, etc. that day. Even the people that he was around, so that maybe it'll spark someone's memory of what was going on that night. Yet, police haven't released any of it, which is, again, very odd. It makes me wonder if there's something bigger going on here, because we're going to be talking about in a moment how there are a number of other missing persons cases also going on in this small town. It makes me wonder if they're trying to be extra cautious because they want to nail the person that did it and they want it to be a very clean arrest. It also makes me wonder if Cole's disappearance is now part of a larger case. Julie saying, and I quote, "The rate of everyone missing has everyone scared and nobody wants to help." End quote. And that is because there is rumors of gang violence, drug deals, and more in this town. Yet, despite that, this was, again, Cole's first time in this town. He wasn't ever associated with stuff like that. Again, he was just passing through. He was there for a couple days and was going on to go start his new life and start working towards building his new family. He wasn't there to, go get wasted and party and do drugs and just go off and disappear somewhere. Now, Cole disappearing from the Lone Star bar isn't the only suspicious thing that has happened there recently. The day before Cole disappeared, a man's body ended up being found inside a car a few blocks from it, which is now being investigated as a suspicious death. The red Dodge Caliber with the man's body inside was located at 17th Street and 116th Avenue. This car was said to be accompanied by a red Dodge Ram 1500 pickup, with gold rim along the lower portion of it. Police say these vehicles may have been in that vicinity where the car eventually would be found, as well as on the Alaska Highway in Dawson Creek. RCMP are also asking anyone with surveillance video, dashcam video, or information regarding this red Dodge Caliber and the red Dodge Ram 1500 pickup truck to contact the Dawson Creek RCMP. So let's talk about the number of missing people that there are currently in Dawson Creek. 29-year-old Darylyn Supernant went missing on March 15th of 2023, along with her 41-year-old cousin, Renee Didier Supernant, who was last seen on video at a gas station in the early morning hours of December 3rd, 2023. There are earlier reports that also say that Renee was last seen at the Lone Star bar, just like Cole. On top of that, Shelby also knew Renee. Remember, this is a small town. Darylyn is described as a happy-go-lucky person with an infectious laugh and enjoyable hobbies like crocheting and fixing up clothes. She was also, though, a user of illicit drugs, which her mother described as a high-risk lifestyle. Renee's grandmother had said that her granddaughter had recently started associating with people involved in drugs after moving back to Dawson Creek from Fort St. John. She was also a mother of 2 children. It's also interesting to note that both of these women are Indigenous. In May of 2024, Renee's body would end up being discovered near Dawson Creek, although there's no information at this point on her autopsy or cause of death. August 29th of 2023, Dave Daniel Domingo would also disappear after police were investigating a shooting. His disappearance is also thought to be suspicious. That's a lot of very recent disappearances for a town of 1,300 people. Shelley Supernant, Darylyn's mother, ended up saying that she doesn't feel safe in the town anymore after her daughter disappeared. And Shelby has also said since she's gone back to Dawson Creek, everything seems weird. Everyone seems on edge. It doesn't seem like the same town that she used to live in when she was younger. Shelly has also said that a shooting occurred near her home, saying, and I quote, "I look at cars differently. I look at people differently. I look at roads differently. My mind is different now. A lot of people at Dawson Creek are on edge." End quote. Let's talk about what I think about Cole's disappearance. I just find it really strange with Cole's disappearance that this was his first time in town. He only knew the little group of people that Shelby had introduced him to in that day or so that they were there, her childhood friends and her family, and then a couple people at the bar that night. So it's not like anyone would have known him or had time to have a grudge or vendetta against him. Unless the people in this bar were the type of people where you just look at them wrong and they take it the wrong way and then they just act violently. Again, when drugs are involved, you never know how people are going to react. And clearly, there are 3 to 4 different incidences that night where there were some kind of altercations, even though the bar claims there was no fights. On top of that, this was such a crowded bar that you think someone would have noticed him leaving. Clearly, he was talking to individuals outside, according to this alleged surveillance video. So police clearly know that someone's seen Cole exit the bar and he was talking to people then, if this is true. So someone out there knows something. They're just not talking. On top of that, Cole seemed like such a very friendly and nice guy. He was standing up for someone in the bar who was getting basically harassed, it seemed like. When someone tried to bully them out of, using the pool table, he told them no. He seemed pretty confident about himself still. Despite all of this, that seemed to have gotten smoothed over. He had a good conversations, saying Happy New Year's and good night to his fiance. It wasn't like he had gotten completely wasted and then got into a physical altercation with someone. This is just such a weird one. Again, this one is just very different from the other missing men's cases that I've been covering. Cole was with Shelby one moment at the bar and then he was just gone. Again, in my opinion, it just doesn't make sense that he would have left that bar without telling her. He just seemed too courteous to do that, to just ditch her and go off to some after party, in my opinion. It also just doesn't make sense that he would go to some after party to get completely wasted since they were leaving in the morning to continue their drive to Medicine Hat. Cole also shouldn't have been drunk enough that night to make some strange rash decision or wander off and die of hypothermia somewhere. He only had a couple drinks and he had stopped before midnight. If he did only have 2 or 3 drinks, especially if he had, been out for hours and hours, he would have pretty much been sober by then, or at least not drunk enough to make some decision to go wandering off in the night in the snow. That is, unless he was drugged, which is one of the only things that makes sense to me, especially since the other woman in their party, who is in her 50s to 60s, she's an older woman. I don't see why she would have lied about something like that, like being drugged. Clearly something happened there, in my opinion. And if Cole did take a shot that also had something in it, I think that could have affected him. You would think that if he had been drugged and had wandered off somewhere, that police would have found surveillance footage of him walking across town and then eventually maybe disappearing into the woods or something. But they haven't said anything like that. So in my opinion, I think someone took advantage of him, whether that be convincing him to go somewhere with them or to kidnap him and then take him somewhere. I think if we've seen the surveillance footage, it would also help us determine which way to go with this as well. But police are just so tight-lipped that I don't know if we'll ever see it. The Canadian police are they don't like releasing stuff. It would be interesting to see, though, if he is stumbling around or if he's walking fine. I think it's also important, if we see this footage, who he's talking to that night. I think it would help maybe bring tips in. It also makes me wonder who paid for these shots, because it seems like from what Shelby said, these shots were just brought over to them, that they didn't order the shots. Now, this may be a big conspiracy, but it's just a theory in my opinion, trying to go off of the little information we do have. But I do wonder if those guys that they had an altercation with earlier in the night that were trying to buy them out of the pool table, I wonder if they didn't get over it and they actually just buddied up to them so that they could let their guards down. It makes me wonder if Cole let his guard down, thinking these guys, were just cool with them now, and that they eventually lured Cole outside of the bar possibly, and then did something to him. Remember, Shelby stated that when she went back inside the bar to look for Cole after her cigarette, Cole was nowhere to be found, and neither were those guys that they had had the altercation with. It makes me wonder if one of these individuals maybe invited Cole outside for a cigarette, just to chat, just something, and then, they did something to him. Makes me wonder if maybe they took him somewhere, beat him up, left him somewhere in the cold, possibly like what happened in the freezing deaths, which I've done cases on before, where police officers would pick up Indigenous men and women, drive them outside the city limits, and just leave them there to walk back. Could just be big conspiracy theory of me after I've looked at so many of these cases and my brain just running wild, especially since he was a new dude in town. He had stood his ground against them. Maybe these guys were completely drunk and just thought, fuck this guy. He's not going to tell us what to do in our town and our bar. And then they ended up tricking him into getting into their vehicle, or maybe they were the ones that drugged these shots and then he took it. He was, not thinking clearly. They took him somewhere and did something to him. But you'd think if something like that happened, they would have found his body somewhere, maybe on the side of the road or something. It makes me wonder if police have fully vetted all these individuals that were at the bar that night, especially the people that are allegedly in the surveillance footage. That's just me completely theorizing. Let's look at Cole one more time. Cole was last seen wearing a green t-shirt, dark green pants, Nike Air Force shoes, and a black hat with a Boston Red Sox B logo. He's a white male with brown hair, brown eyes, standing 5'11" and around 200 pounds. He has multiple tattoos, including a rose on his right temple, CLXXXV on his left temple, an owl on his neck, and a sleeve on his right arm. Cole's family needs answers. His fiance misses him, his mother misses him, his siblings miss him, his friends miss him, and most of all, his son misses him. Julie recently wrote on Facebook, and I quote, "Dear Cole, it's been 159 days since we last saw your face, heard your infectious laugh, and felt your presence. There's so much I want to share with you. So many things left unsaid. Your absence haunts me every day. Bentley is visiting now, and you wouldn't believe how much he's grown in these last few months. He's potty trained now, talks nonstop, and seems to eat every 5 minutes. He reminds me so much of you. The way he makes faces, his laugh, his love for performing. He has a big personality just like you. He wears his daddy hoodie every day. Today he told me that his daddy, his mommy, Brandon, and his nanas were all his best friends. He misses you deeply. He tells me his daddy is in the sky with baby Hendrix, and it breaks my heart even more. Taylor is doing wonderfully. You should be very proud of her. She's taking control of her life and making herself a priority. And Brian, well, he's Brian. He has such a big heart and loves Bentley so much. He tells me all the time he will be the very best he can be for Bentley. Things aren't the same without you here, and they never will be. I hope you know how truly loved you are." End quote. I'm sorry, that made me emotional. Cole's son doesn't deserve to grow up without a father, and Cole doesn't deserve to not watch his son grow up. He was just trying to go and better his life, and someone took that all away from all of these people. This case has really touched me, researching it, going over it, now telling it all to you all. And I truly, truly hope by some grace that Cole is out there somewhere and they end up finding him alive, so that he can be back in the arms of the people that love him, so he can continue to build his life and to raise his child and go on to have more children. But as more time passes, that is getting more unlikely. And it's heartbreaking. But I do know one thing. Someone out there knows something, and they are just not talking. So I'm speaking to you. If you out there do know something, please come forward. Give this family answers. If you're going to do it for anyone, do it for Cole's son. My heart goes out to Cole's entire family. I am rallying for all of you. And I truly, truly hope that this is a positive ending. On top of that, my heart goes out to all the families of the missing people in this story. Because again, Cole's not the only one that's missing. But if you do have any information, I will leave the appropriate authorities to contact below. Again, if you know something, please say something. As always, I hope you all stay safe out there. Lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.